Football season is officially over. The Super Bowl has ended. The Eagles beat the Chiefs really, really badly. I don't even remember what the final score was. Is there anything that the Texas Longhorns can learn from the last game of the football season? Yes. Even though it's college and the NFL, is there anything the Texas Longhorns can learn from what we saw in the Super Bowl? I think so. And we discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I feel like I was just reading that like a week ago and it was at 300. So, yeah, if that doesn't tell you football season is over, what will, right? On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, once again, Super Bowl 59 is in the books. And even though that's on the NFL level, football is football. So what can the Texas Longhorns possibly learn about what we saw last night between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles? In the second segment, I should have put more context on the graphic looking at it, but Texas women's basketball, it was overshadowed by the fact that it was Super Bowl Sunday, but they had a huge win beating South Carolina at home. We discussed that in the second segment. And then in the last segment, Xavier Worthy makes history, but we don't do suspense on this show. The first Longhorn to ever score in the Super Bowl. Xavier Worthy, the first Texas Longhorn to ever score in the Super Bowl. It's 2025, so we show him some love. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so when I'm looking at the Super Bowl, when I'm watching it, right? And like I said, I know this is Locked On Longhorns. I know that we're talking college football and NFL football at the same time, but just hear me out, right? The wheels are turning up here, but just hear me out. Football is football, right? Football is football. And usually what it takes to win at the high school level translates to the college level, and that translates to the National Football League level. And so there could be some similarities between this Texas team and the Philadelphia Eagles, right? And we've been asking the question because this is a Texas team that's been in the semifinals the last 2 years, but unable to get past the semifinals. What would they need to do to get over the hump? And so you look at the Eagles, who 2 years ago, they lost in the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then the last year, they lose the division to the Dallas Cowboys. And then I think they made the playoffs, but I think they lost in the first round. I think they lost in the first round. So, they go from losing the Super Bowl to not having a great season at all to coming back and finally getting over the hump and winning it this year. Even though they won it in 2017, this is, largely a different group. So they come back and then win it this year, right? So a team that was unable to get over the hump 2 years in a row comes back and wins it in the third year. Now you're looking at Texas to do the same thing, right? You lose in the semifinals to Washington. You lose in the semifinals to Ohio State. Can you come back and be triumphant and win the national championship this year, a la the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl last night? And so what can Texas learn from that dominant victory against the Kansas City Chiefs? Here's what I came up with. We always talk about the three most important positions in football. If you want to be a dominant football team, you have to have really good players at the three most important positions in football, right? And I think we saw that from the Philadelphia Eagles. Quarterback, obviously Jalen Hurts. The tackles that are protecting the quarterback, Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, two of the best in the league for sure. But what stood out to me in that game and should have stood out to everybody that watched it was that pass rush was, a nightmare for Patrick Mahomes. It felt like after the first or second play, he was running for his life the entire game. And that's been a theme in football for a long time, right? Especially since, football has transitioned to more of a passing game. You have to have guys on that defensive line that can absolutely wreck a game plan because they're capable of it, right? A good pass rush, a great pass rush, an elite pass rush can absolutely flip a football game like no other. And we saw that in the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. That game was essentially over before it started because the Chiefs' offensive line had no answer for the Eagles' defensive line. They were dominant, right? And what is crazy is I believe that they pressured Patrick Mahomes on over 40% of his dropbacks, which is insane, right? It's almost every time you drop back, every other time you drop back, I mean, you're running for your life. And it got to the point to where he didn't even have to. I mean, he just was happy feet in the pocket. Tom Brady kept mentioning it. He was running I mean, he just was completely uncomfortable, right? They did not blitz him one time. Just rushing forward, just getting to him. They did not blitz him one time, which also allowed them to put 7 men in coverage every single time. And he didn't have anywhere to go with the football because they just constantly were winning up front, right? And we've seen that as a theme where in these big games, teams with this elite pass rush just take over. Because what I saw between the Eagles and the Chiefs reminded me of the last Super Bowl that Patrick Mahomes lost against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? Where his offensive line, now he was missing like 2-3 starters in that game on the offensive line, but he was running for his life the entire time. And it was like Vita Vea and Dominican Sue, Shaq Barrett, whoever else they had were just getting after him constantly. He was running for his life the entire time. You remember the championship game last year between Michigan and Washington. And what did we say? Like, oh, it was just Michigan's defensive line. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart. I mean, just making life a living hell for Michael Penix Jr. I remember he walked off the field like clutching his ribs. Like that pass rush just had him in hell the entire game. The game before he threw for 400 plus yards against us and looked more comfortable in the pocket than damn near anybody I've ever seen. And the next game, he looked like he did not enjoy playing football the way that Michigan pass rush got to him, right? If you look at Texas season, the way that their season ended, not being able to block Jack Sawyer, right? Remember the Super Bowl against the between the Rams and the Bengals. Last play, who seals the Super Bowl? Aaron Donald, not being able to block him. At the end of the day, when you have a pass rush like that simply cannot be stopped, it is a nightmare for the opposing offense, and there is nothing you can do about it. When you're getting constant pressure on the quarterback in that manner, and you are constantly in the quarterback's lap, it's damn near impossible to win a football game that way. And that's what the Eagles did to Patrick Mahomes. And so you translate that and you say, how can Texas get over the hump? You have to develop a pass rush that is so elite or is that so good that you can simply just take the other offense out of the game. And you have the guys to do it on the outside, right? You know, Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek. You're still able to pick up players in the portal, some young players that you're bringing in. You have the type of guys on the edge that can simply take over a game and shut down an entire opposing offense. Do you have those guys up the middle? Now that you've lost Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, that remains to be seen. You're talking about an Eagles team that has guys like Jalen Carter in the middle, right? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if we have that up front. But what I'm saying is that a pass rush will always be able to simply take over a game by themselves. And I thought that's what the Eagles defense did against Patrick Mahomes. Once again, pressuring him over 40% of his dropbacks and did not blitz him one time, which allowed them to continuously put 7 people in coverage. Another thing that we saw a lot from the Texas Longhorns, which is a reason they were a really good football team, just didn't end up being good enough, is turnovers, right? The Eagles won the turnover battle 3-1. Jalen Hurts did have an interception where they zero blitzed him. He just kind of threw it up to A.J. Brown. It was a little short. The player came under it and intercepted it, but then they forced a 3-and-out right after that. So the Chiefs didn't score off of it. But the Eagles had a pick six. Shout out to Cooper DeJean on his birthday, right? He got another interception that I'm sure the Eagles turned into points because it looked like it was on the Chiefs side of the field. And then the game was already out of hand at that point, but they had the big fumble at the end where they just kind of smacked Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it looked like he was concussed. You know what I'm saying? And then they got the ball back. So turnovers will always be the great equalizer. You know, even though the Eagles had the better roster, a lot of people felt like the Chiefs were just going to find a way to figure it out. And those turnovers essentially shot any chance that the Chiefs had in the foot, right? Because it's Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, he's the second coming of Tom Brady. I still think that Tom Brady's a little step above, but Patrick Mahomes is in that breath, right? The Chiefs are in the breath that the Patriots were in. And so we kept thinking, oh, okay, yeah, it's 7-0, it's 10-0, 17-0. But here come the Chiefs, right? Like, oh, they're gonna get it together. This is gonna be the drive where the Chiefs turn it around. Like, it really didn't like hit me to the third quarter, like, okay, this game might be over. I just kept thinking like the Chiefs are gonna find a way, you know. But it's like every time you thought that here it goes, here's the drive, here's the moment, you know, where Patrick Mahomes finds his rhythm. Was the pass rush or they forced a turnover, right? Every drive where you're like, okay, here go the Chiefs, a turnover or a big sack, forcing a punt, right? So that defense, just the way that they absolutely overwhelmed Patrick Mahomes and that offense reminded us of the Super Bowl we saw in 2020 between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Patrick Mahomes, where he was running for his life. That is what Texas has to be able to get to. We were an elite defense this year, but we weren't overwhelming, especially in the playoffs. And I think that's the point that this defense can get to. But you're going to have guys up in the middle that are to the same quality as Colin Simmons and Trey Moore. And then the last thing I want to say, as we've talked about it a lot, is the Eagles had an answer to anything that the Chiefs could present. All right. Chiefs came into the game with the best scoring defense in the league. So they allowed the fewest points in the league, right? And so you're looking at it and you're like, the wide receivers didn't just have a huge game. You know, AJ Brown had like 40 yards. He had a touchdown. Um, Devontae Smith had the big 40-yard touchdown, which was just a dime by Jalen Hurts, just a beautiful throw. But it didn't feel like the wide receivers were taking over the game, right? And then you look at it and you say Saquon largely was shut down, right? Saquon didn't have the Saquon type of game. When the Chiefs needed a play, we saw Steve Spagnuolo go to what he does best, right? Which is a lot of blitzing, really coming after the Eagles. And what was the answer? You're going to blitz us. You're going to play a lot of man, but you're not accounting for Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts was able to run for 72 yards. And that's one of the biggest reasons that he won Super Bowl MVP, was because whenever the Eagles looked like they were in trouble offensively, whenever it looked like everything was covered, whenever it looked like, you know, Saquon Barkley couldn't get going, whenever it looked like the Chiefs defense may win against the Eagles, Jalen Hurts was able to take off and extend drives. Once again, 72 rushing yards. A lot of those were on key third downs or just key moments where it felt like, you know, the Chiefs were about to make a play. Not necessarily make a play to get back in the game, but, you know, when you're at the end of the game and you're trying to seal it and you're trying to keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, a lot of those runs were really, really crucial to keeping those drives going, making sure the Eagles got points and taking more time off the clock. And so I think that that's what fans have been kind of waiting for with the Texas Longhorns. And when we have now an Arch Manning, that ability to have an answer to no matter what the defense throws at you, right? Because if you rush too many people at Arch Manning and you don't have the right gap integrity or the right lane integrity, he can get out of there and hit you for 40, 50 yards at a time with his speed and his athleticism. And that's just something we didn't have with Quinn Ewers. So when I look at this Eagles team that just got over the hump, and I look at a Texas team that's looking to get over the hump, a pass rush, the ability to force turnovers, and have a quarterback that's mobile, athletic, and can provide an answer to anything that the defense throws at you. I think that's what Texas needs to be able to get over the hump and win a national championship this season. And they just might have it. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we want to show love to the women. Like I said, they were overshadowed by Super Bowl Sunday, but what a huge win for the Texas Longhorns, beating Don Staley in the South Carolina women's Gamecocks at home yesterday. We discussed. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And I don't think I actually said it, but I think they sacked the Patrick Mahomes 7 times. I know I said they pressured him on like over 40% of his dropbacks. They actually got 7 sacks. So they weren't just getting to him, like getting in his face. Like they were actually getting him on the ground. And like I said, they did not blitz 1 time. So, I mean, that doesn't tell you that's an elite pass rush. Sheesh, man. And they were coming at them in ways. I forgot to say, too, shout out to Forever Longhorn Mora Ojimo on winning the Super Bowl. How could I forget to say that? It's Locked on Longhorns, right? So shout out to Forever Longhorn Mora Ojimo. Speaking of the Super Bowl again, I thought that the best commercial by far was the Nike women's commercial. I thought that was super dope. Um, just the message, the athletes in it, Asia Wilson, Juju Watkins, Jordan Childs, Caitlin Clark, of course. Like I thought that was just a great commercial, but I thought the message too, right? Like if you can't win, so just win, right? Because we do move the goalposts a lot for our women, right? Like no matter what they do, we find fault with it. And especially our women's athletes. We try to keep them in a box. We try to keep them contained with their emotions. Don't be too loud. Don't be too boisterous. Don't be, this. Don't be that, right? Everything that we allow our men athletes to do, we kind of shame our women for doing it. So I thought that that Nike women's commercial was really dope. Just kind of highlighting that, like, no matter what you do, they're gonna have something to say. So just go do it anyway, right? And make sure you win while you're doing it. Sha'Carri Richardson. How could I forget about Sha'Carri Richardson? Obviously, in the commercial. So I thought that was the best commercial by far, and I thought that it was kind of fitting that on a day where that was the commercial that stood out the most to me. Our women's basketball team was doing their thing in the Moody Center, beating the South Carolina and Don Staley in basketball, and that's just such a huge accomplishment. I know it's a regular season game. It really has no bearing on the season. South Carolina could still end up winning the championship at the end. But you're talking about a team that was 38-0 last year and won the championship. You're talking about a team the year before that probably wins the championship if they don't lose to, Iowa and Caitlin Clark. South Carolina is on a UConn women's type run, where Gino Auriemma, where it just felt like there was nothing you could do to stop them from winning the championship every single year. And maybe that's the case again this year. I mean, that roster is absolutely loaded. When you got players like Malaysia Fawali coming off the bench, I mean, South Carolina is absolutely loaded and they're not going anywhere as long as Don Staley is there. And so for Texas to be able to beat them at home yesterday is a hell of an accomplishment. And we spend so much time talking about what Rodney Terry and what the men's basketball team isn't. We spend so much time talking about it, and I mean, who knows if they'll even make the tournament? I mean, they've lost to Vandy, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Auburn, Florida. I mean, it just doesn't look good for Texas at all. But like I said, we spend so much time talking about what this men's basketball team isn't instead of glorifying what this women's basketball team is. I mean, this is one of the best programs in the country, one of the best programs at the University of Texas, and they proved it again yesterday. To be able to beat a team like South Carolina, I don't care if it's at home or away. I mean, like I said, in this era of college basketball right now is just such a huge accomplishment. So shout out to our women. They had lost to South Carolina previously. I can't remember if it was last month. I think it was last month, like 67-50, in South Carolina. And so they kind of put it to them. So to be able to come back and win this game, it was really good. I know there was like a little kid reporter that asked Jalen Hurts before the Super Bowl, are you going to get your lick back? And they did and beat the Chiefs. So, you could say that the women's basketball team got their lick back as well against Don Staley and South Carolina, beating them 66-62. And so they had a big lead going into halftime. It was actually 36-27. So they had a 9-point lead going into halftime. But then South Carolina, the championship pedigree, they bounced back, outscoring them 22-13 in the third. So it was tied going into the fourth. But then Texas was able to outscore them by 4. Final score being 66-62. Came down to some clutch free throws from Rory Harmon. She knocked those down. Of course, when you talk about who led the way, we had 3 players in, double figures in terms of points. Madison Booker, 20 points and 11 rebounds doing her thing. You had Kyla with 13 points and 6 rebounds. And then you had Taylor Jones with 11 points and 4 steals. So just a really good performance like that from them. And then, like I said, Rory Harmon made the clutch free throws at the end with 11 seconds left to secure the victory for Texas. That was the first time that South Carolina lost a SEC game in the regular season since 2021, right? Texas broke a 57 game streak, 57 game win streak for the South Carolina women yesterday. So, like I said, a lot of talk about the Super Bowl, but the Texas women's basketball team did something amazing. I just want to read some of these stats about this team that we need to be going a lot harder for, right? Because this is a team that absolutely can win a national championship this year. Texas is 24-2 on the season and 10-1 in SEC play. The Longhorns are 13-0 at home this season, 45-5 all time at the Moody Center. Dating back to last season, the Longhorns have won 20 straight at home. They won their 7th game of the season this year against a ranked opponent and 4th win of the season over a top 10 team. The Longhorns held an opponent under 40% shooting for the 14th time this season, and they are 14-0 when doing so. 14 times they have held a team under 40% shooting. We know that Vic Schaefer is all about defense, and this is a team that gets out there and gets after it, right? He talks about riding the bull, riding the bull when you're guarding your man or woman, I should say. And this team really takes after his identity. So, like I said, this is a team that absolutely can win a national championship. They proved it yesterday by beating South Carolina. This team deserves a lot of love, and this was a 1 seed last year that didn't make it to the Final Four. I'm putting my money on it that they will make the Final Four this year. Like I said, hopefully they're hoisting the trophy at the end. So just a lot of love for this women's basketball team. I probably don't cover them enough. It's just me being self-aware. I try to do a better job of that. But when they do something like beating South Carolina, you got to talk about it. And, like I said, shout out to Vic Schaefer and, what he's done for this Texas program. Madison Booker, Rory Harmon, Taylor Jones, Shea Holly, just all of those players, that show up and show out every game and defend the Moody Center the way that they do and defend this program the way that they do. And, like I said, hopefully they're hoisting the trophy at the end. And I'm really excited to watch the rest of their season, especially when you get into postseason play. All right, quick word from our sponsors. And then we talk about Xavier Worthy. He made history coming into the season, running the fastest 40-yard dash ever. Oops. He made history again yesterday in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. We discuss. All right. So you look at this team this year, and I thought they were missing somebody like an Xavier Worthy, right? I'm not sure how all Texas fans feel about X. I think most feel great, but there were some times where, the relationship might have been a little contentious. Just, there were some drop issues. There was the, kind of threatening a transfer. I know that when he left and he posted his draft video, he took a direct shot at some Texas fans. But all in all, he was just a great player. And even though he did a lot at the University of Texas, I mean, statistically, he's one of the greatest wide receivers to ever come through the University of Texas in a time where we desperately needed it, right? I mean, Sark's first recruit, coming into Texas, and he's had a lot of good ones, but his first one, I mean, he hit a home run with Xavier Worthy. And you looked at it this year, and it felt like you were just missing that one game breaker on the outside. Matthew Golden kind of turned into that, and I'm happy for his success. It looks like he's going to be a first-round pick. But Xavier Worthy is just a different level of, like, game breaker. You know what I mean? Like, he has a little, like, Deshaun Jackson in him, where he's just always one play away from absolutely demoralizing the other team. And he was able to do that in the Super Bowl. Too bad it was too late. You know what I'm saying? Because it was like the Chiefs couldn't even get past half field like the first 3 quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, they just said, F it. Like Xavier Worthy down there somewhere, and it started working. So he was able to catch 2 really deep passes. I think he ended up with 6 catches, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But the 2 touchdowns is the key. Because you talk about Texas being a blue blood program, right? You talk about Texas having, I'm not sure if we're at the 800 plateau yet, but it's over 700 wins, national championships, Heisman Trophy winners, right? Like a program that you absolutely cannot tell the story of college football without. And although, once again, it's college football and then the National Football League, they're 2 separate things. Football is football, and they intertwine. You would expect that a program that has produced so many NFL players would have somebody that has scored in the Super Bowl before, right? No. Texas had never had a player score in the Super Bowl until Xavier Worthy did it twice, albeit in garbage time. But until Xavier Worthy did it twice against the Kansas City Chiefs, man. So there's just been so much talk about Xavier Worthy, even in the NFL, right? Is he a true receiver? Is he just a gadget guy? How successful will he be with the Chiefs? And I felt bad for him. Like, if I had any emotion for a singular player, there were some players I was happy for on the Eagles, but more so it was, damn, like, I was hurt for Xavier Worthy because now you got to come back and do it all over again. And you get to the Super Bowl, you think you're gonna win it, especially when you got Patrick Mahomes on your side, and they got to do it all over again and get there. And he will. Like, he's gonna be playing with the Chiefs for a long time. He's gonna be playing with Patrick Mahomes. He's gonna get back to the Super Bowl. He's absolutely gonna win one, right? I have no doubt about that. But I was proud of Xavier Worthy because, I mean, he just showed like how he could be at any given point the most dynamic weapon in the National Football League. At any given point, he can hit you over the head for 50, 60, right? And he made some tough catches on those 2 touchdowns. So, Xavier Worthy is going to have a hell of an NFL career. I'm proud, that he came from the University of Texas. He's representing the University of Texas in everything he does. And, he got a huge monkey off of our back, right? It's not something that, people are walking around in the street like, ha ha, y'all haven't had anybody scoring a Super Bowl. But it's something that should have happened by now. It's something that absolutely should have happened by now. And now it's something we never have to mention again because of Xavier Worthy. But just outside of that, right? Outside of him being the first Longhorn to score in a Super Bowl, I was super proud of him for putting on that performance, albeit in a losing effort. But he's going to get back. He's going to be a champion. He's going to be a hell of a wide receiver in the National Football League. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace. Let's go Cowboys, Super Bowl 60.